In this talk, I'm going to discuss having binary data to upload as part of a POST request. For example, there are websites where you can upload an image. That's binary data, and that data is partly specified in the HTTP request header, but primarily it's in the request body. And I'm not going to explain the HTTP specification for multi-part MIME data. You can Google that and learn that on your own. But the key thing for RPT, Rational Performance Tester, is that substitution, the binary data, cannot be done with output from custom code because custom code returns a string. And binary data could contain zeros, hex zeros, which terminate a string. So reading a file and returning it from custom code is not going to work. There's other ways to do it. There's two other ways to do it. You can substitute for recorded binary data. I also how to do that. And then if you haven't recorded binary data and you've hand-coded the test and all you have is a string and you want to substitute from a file that's binary, you can do that with substitution, and I'll show that as well. So here I have a website that allows me to upload binary data, and I just want to show you what the interaction is with this website because this is what I will be turning into a test script. So you click Edit there, and it has a couple places where you can upload images. I'm selecting an image there, and I'm browsing to another image and selecting another image there. And then I will click to commit, which uploads the data. So that's the POST request. And then I'll show you what that looks like inside of RPT. And it's the commit there that has all the data, and it's body data, and you can see it was recorded as a binary data chunk. And the way to get this from a file, well, actually what I've got is I've got a data pool that contains the file names, and these files must exist on the hard drive. I'm saying do it randomly, it doesn't really matter. And I'm saying pick the data from a file, and like I say, the file needs to be on the hard drive in the location. Now I will show you that is what the data pool looks like. You can see it's a Windows C Users Administrator type of name. On Linux, you would use a Linux address. And this reference that I'm showing here shows an example of how to do it for Windows and Linux. So there's a reference there that you can read up on in case some of your agents are Linux and some are Windows, which is not recommended. Okay, so now how do I verify that that substitution got the data from a file? I click on the top of the test and I say show substitutions, and there is this file substitutor that I did, and you can see that it says file substituted data, and it's comes from that data pool, and it says it's a binary data chunk. So that's the way to do it from recording. Now I'll show you how to do it if you were going to do it hand-coded. In order to hand-code POST data, you need to know a few things. You need to know the contents of the separator header. You need to add a start separator field to the request body. You need to add the binary content to the request body, which we will do as plain text and then substitute in this case. You need to add the end separator. Well, how can you know what those headers look like? Well, a couple of ways. You can capture network traffic using Wireshark or Fiddler, or you can capture network traffic using RPT, which is what I'll be doing in this demonstration. What I'm showing here is RPT's capture of the request header, that is the content type. And you can see it says it's multi-part form data boundary, and it shows what the boundary is. And the one thing to note is that the number of dashes here is actually different than the number of dashes that show up in the separator. If I recall, there's 2 additional dashes in the separator field itself. If you look at the HTTP spec to understand what that's about. What I'm showing here is the body data that I'm going to need to reproduce. There's 3 pieces that I just discussed. And we'll look at each of those so I can discuss what they are. This is the initial separator, and it has some additional identifying information of the content that's going to follow. The next header is actually the binary data. I'm not going to copy this, but I'm just pointing out that that's the middle piece. And the next piece is the end separator. Now I'll take you through the process of manually creating this. And I'm going to add a new piece of binary data, and I'm actually going to copy that header in there. Now, in this, here I show the, this is very important because I show the carriage returns and line feeds. If you're doing this by hand, be aware that there's a couple of carriage return and line feeds that you can't see, and you have to have them there, or this will not work. So I'm just pointing that out because that's a gotcha. And of course, you're supposed to put a file name in there, and you're going to probably want to substitute it. You're going to want to, you have to do a little bit more coding in a real test. So now I'm going to add the actual content for the data. And since I don't have binary data, I'm just going to modify it. And I'm going to type in a string. This is just plain text. I'm typing it in. Because then I'm going to show that you can substitute over this plain text, but you have to tell RPT that it's binary data, because when you record binary data, it knows it's binary data, but since I'm not recording this, I'm hand coding it. I'll have to substitute and select the data source. I'm going to go back to the same place and pick that data pool. And then there's one additional step I have to do. I select that, and you say file content substitutor. You have to tell it it's coming from a file. So if you're hand coding it, you need to tell it it's binary. Go back to the table view, and then you have to put a final separator. Once again, this is multi-part MIME specification, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. Just be aware that the last one has an extra couple of dashes at the end, and anyone previous to that does not. So if you're going to muck with the recording, make sure you get rid of the 2 dashes that's not in the last one, the very last header. And now I'm going to create a new header. To terminate this, I'm going to paste the one that I got from elsewhere. So there I manually added binary data as part of a substitution. So to summarize, post requests can contain binary data. If you want to upload an image, you will want to substitute from a file. The file has to exist on the hard drive, and that's on your agents, as well as any place. If you're going to run it from the workbench, it needs to be on the workbench. The substitution can't be done with custom code, because custom code returns a string. And there's 2 ways to do the substitution. You can substitute for recorded binary data, or you can hand code it and do the substitution for plain text, but then you have to tell RPT that it comes from a file.